From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
I was tremendously impressed by Slaughter's writing skill, by her sense of place and character, and most of all by her seriousness. There was a lot of violence against women in this novel, but it was never gratuitous. It was an angry woman saying, "This is what is happening in the world and we need to stop it." I gave the novel a rave review and predicted great things for Karin Slaughter. Happily, I was right. I'm not always right. Her subsequent novels about Sarah Linton became bestsellers, and more recently she has written 3 excellent novels about, featuring Special Agent Will Trent of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Her most recent novel, Broken, her 10th novel, actually features both Will Trent and Sarah Linton. There are a lot of outstanding women crime novelists today. We could mention Sue Grafton, Sarah Paretsky, Laura Lippman, Elizabeth George, Martha Grimes, Denise Mina in England. Karin belongs on that list, and it's a pleasure to present her to you.
Thank you. Thank you, readers and people who are just inside because this is the only shade. I've been told it's getting cooler, but I don't believe it. And I'm from Georgia, so this is sort of like winter for me. I want to start before I talk about myself and how wonderful I am by saying that we're in a real national crisis here, and probably you're thinking in what area, because there are so many areas in which we are in crisis. But I want to talk a little bit about libraries and how important our libraries are. I don't know any writers who didn't get a start in the library. And, in the South especially, because those, when we were growing up, were the only buildings that had air conditioning. But the library is the center of every community. The people who use it, in many cases, can't afford books otherwise. In rural areas, 85% of the children in these areas, the only time they have access to technology or books outside of school is in their public library. And we really need to do our best as a community to make sure that libraries stay open and fully staffed, because being a librarian is not just a vocation, it's an art. And I know that I got my start because the librarians at my library saw what I was reading and said, come over here. You need to stop reading about the V.C. Andrews and all these other books that are routinely turned down in the corners where the good parts are, because there are other books out there for you. And they gave me Gone with the Wind, they gave me Nancy Drew, Encyclopedia Brown. They gave me the gift of my life. And there are so many kids out there who are going to be denied that if we let libraries close. So I wanted to open with that. Now, I also want to speak in praise of the lowly thriller. This is something that I ask usually at the beginning of events like this. Why is plot a bad thing? The great thing about thrillers is they have to have a plot. They have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's what I like when I read a story, and that's what I write when I sit down to write my books. But it's interesting here because the Library of Congress, of course, is the center of this event. And one of my favorite urban legends, or perhaps it's not an urban legend, is the library of the catalog data for a book that we all know, The Great Gatsby, is filed in the Library of Congress under automobiles, accidents. And I think of that when people ask me what sort of books you write. They take one look at me and they say, well, do you write children's books? And I always say, well, my second book had children die. And generally that shuts them up. I don't know why, but, or they'll say, who's your publisher? And I'll say Random House, and they'll say, oh, that's a real publisher. So I don't know, maybe I should dress better, or they always want me to be taller. But I think I'm writing in a genre that is the best genre in the world. And if I told you a story about a local community leader who was very charismatic and angered the government, and this vicious prosecutor who wanted to bring him down and paid off a snitch to turn him in and framed him for a crime and eventually gave this community leader the death penalty. You might think that's a John Grisham book, but it's actually the story of Jesus Christ. Or if I told you about an alleged rape in a small Alabama town, of course, I would be thinking of To Kill a Mockingbird. Or a murderous elephant who opens up like Water for Elephants. Or the story of a pedophile in Lovely Bones. The interesting thing about categorizing books is once a lot of really smart and educated people like them, they stop calling them thrillers. And so my goal now is for you to take away this one thing, that thrillers are the best books in the world. Thank you. When I think about what the form really is meant to do, it's meant to tell the story of society. And when I think about my favorite thriller authors, whether it's someone like Denise Mina or Mike Connolly or James Lee Burke, or if I go further back to someone like Flannery O'Connor, who really used violence in the form of the Southern Gothic to not just talk about violence per se, but to use it as a fulcrum to pull the scab off the human condition. Because that's what people are really writing about when they're writing serious thrillers. They're writing about humanity. They're not just writing about people who have awful things happen to them. They're writing about the aftermath of violence. And part of that interest of mine comes from being raised in the South during the time of the Atlanta child murders. And even though I was not the profile of the victim during the Atlanta child murders, I was probably the furthest thing from it. I was terrified as a kid because when you're a child, you don't realize that bad things can happen to children. And it changed my life in very meaningful ways. I was no longer allowed to play wherever I wanted. I started watching a lot more television because usually, and anyone raised in the South knows this, during the summer when you're out of school, your mom kicks you out of the house and locks the door and says, if you get thirsty, there's the hose. When they stopped doing that, we were allowed to stay in our houses during the day. And so it really changed my life, and it made me interested in writing about how these life-changing crimes occur and what the violence leaves behind. Another reason I think I'm drawn to this genre is my grandmother loved telling everybody secrets. Now, she would have a heart attack if we told hers, but when I was a little girl, she loved taking us to church, and my parents didn't like me to go to her church because they had basically stopped handling snakes about a year before I was born. And they put the primitive in Primitive Baptist. But my grandmother loved showing me off, and every Easter Sunday we would go to church with her, and she would say, at the end, she would introduce me to her friends, and I'd be there in my little patent leather shoes and my underwear with the little bloomers on the lace on the back, which is very uncomfortable in this heat, I might add. And she would say, this is Miss Harris or this is Miss Jones. And then as soon as the woman turned her back, she'd say, well, she's a drinker. Or, her husband's cheating on her with the gardener. There was always this dark, dark thing. And another thing that my grandmother loved was a magazine called True Crime Magazine. And it's probably still published today, but it's an awful, awful magazine. It's basically violent pornography. And the covers would always have a woman on the front, looking over her shoulder, and the headlines would be, she should have listened to her husband, or she should have never left the house. And inside were all these horrible true stories of women who have left the house and were subsequently murdered. And this really tied into stories my dad told me when I grew up. As the youngest of three girls, he really realized early on he needed to keep us in hand. And so most of our stories that he told us were like the little girl who left open the kitchen door and was killed, or the little girl who left the heat on and was killed. So you can see why I come by this very honestly. But my grandmother loved reading these true crime magazines. And one year I had the great idea that we would buy her a subscription for Christmas, because she had to go to the trashy store on the other side of town to get the magazine because it wasn't sold at our store. And so we bought her this gift, and I was right there at her knee waiting for her to open up the little card. And she read it, and she burst into tears. And she said, I don't want the mailman to know that I read that. And so I think that here we are many years later, and we're at a point in our lives, especially as women, where we can admit that we're interested in reading about these things. We want to know about violence. We want to know how people respond to it. We want to know how it changes them. And that's really the focus of my work. Pat, who's a wonderful man, by the way, a wonderful writer on his own and an excellent reviewer, and I don't say that just because he gave me a nice review. But you know, the wonderful thing about crime fiction today is, especially with women writing about violent crime, I think it's really changed the tone of the genre. And I think in many ways it's made men who write crime fiction even better at what they do. Because before, I think in the 80s and 90s, women in crime fiction written by men were only there to be saved or to have sex with. And now women go toe-to-toe with men. And Lee Child is one of my favorite authors, and I think he's an excellent example of this. The women in his books are so strong, and they go to Reacher and they face up to him, and he respects them, and that's why I like reading a Lee Child book. You know, as much as men can identify with that sort of James Bond, wonderful Jack Reacher thing, I think women can identify with the fact that Reacher really respects women. And that's a wonderful thing to read about in crime fiction. And I try to do that in mine because I think it's important when we're writing about topics such as child abuse or domestic violence or that sort of thing to show that women are strong and that they're survivors and that they're quite capable of saving themselves. And so I hope when you read my books that you really see that that's what my focus is. And before I open up to questions, which hopefully you guys will have because we've got a lot of minutes left, I am the warm-up act for Scott Turow, so, you know, throw me a bone here. My next book that's coming out next summer is called Fallen. And I got the idea for Fallen because I was lucky enough to be on a training exercise with the agents at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And what they did is they took over an abandoned school one day, and they had a simulation where there was a school shooter. Now, before Columbine, and actually during Columbine, the procedure when there was a school shooting was to go to the school and establish a perimeter and then go from classroom to classroom to classroom and clear people out, clear out the wounded. Now, as we saw in Fort Hood, the procedure is go and kill the person who is killing people. And so instead of being a standoff that lasts for hours, it's something that only lasts usually a few minutes. I think the shooter at Fort Hood, the woman who took him out maybe in 3 minutes after she got the call. And so I was going with these agents as they were being trained to go through this school and look for this shooter and take out the shooter, sometimes kill him, sometimes just subdue him and get him on the floor. And they had role players, and they had people screaming and people saying, oh, this child's been injured, or this teacher needs your help. And the agents had to ignore all of this and just find the shooter. And many of them were distracted. I was distracted as I followed them through this. And the remarkable thing to me was the longest anyone took to go into the school and take the shooter down was about 1 minute and 22 seconds. And if you think about the lives that are saved, that's a really remarkable thing. And I think I felt really fortunate as someone who lives in Georgia and has nieces and nephews in schools that they were doing this, that they were practicing to do this, because of course, unfortunately, it's going to happen one day. And what I felt when I was following them through was this huge rush of adrenaline. And when I got home, I thought, I really want to write about that. And so when I started writing Fallen, I wanted my detective, Faith Mitchell, to have a similar experience. It doesn't happen at a school. I haven't just ruined the plot for you, so please still buy the book. But I wanted to talk about that adrenaline I felt and really get into the story. And it opened up so many different avenues of this character, just being in that kind of situation. And I think that's why I love my research so much, because it gives me the opportunity to walk in the shoes of someone that I never would otherwise. And it was just a thrill to do that. So hopefully you guys will enjoy it and read it. And now I beg you, please, have some questions. Anyone? Woohoo!
Good afternoon. I wanted to know, well, I agree with you that plot is important, but it's your characterizations, I think, is why I really buy your books. I just love them, and I want to know two things. One, are Will and Sarah going to get together? And two, Will's disability and where that comes from in terms of perhaps your background or interest or whatever.
Well, I can only answer one question, so I'll answer the one about Will. You'll have to read the books for the other.
All right.
My sister has dyslexia, and she wasn't diagnosed until she was 30. Well, not officially diagnosed. Before that, she was diagnosed as stupid. And really, that's what the teachers told my parents and the great private school system in Georgia. That's what they told my parents. And so we did think that she was just not very smart as we were growing up. And she's lived with that stigma for a long time. And when she finally got the diagnosis, she said to the doctor, I can't read this, what does it say? But she said, thank you, because all these years I just assumed I was stupid. And she's really one of the smartest people I know. So I wanted to write a little bit about that, and that's what got me thinking about Will Trent and making him dyslexic and making someone who has a disability the hero, because normally in fiction when someone has a disability, they're either a maniacal killer or they are someone you should feel sorry for. And I don't want anyone to ever feel sorry for Will, because he's really a quite capable person. And as I was investigating dyslexia to write more about it, I was looking at the symptoms of dyslexia, and I thought these are really the characteristics of a very good detective. Very puzzle-oriented, very problem-solving, very cued into emotional cues, that sort of thing. And so I wanted to incorporate that into his character, and hopefully I have. I've had a lot of positive response for people, and I think it's important because in a lot of books, usually you can tell who the bad guy is because they don't like reading. It's sort of like in Hollywood, you know it's a bad person if they smoke. And so this is my devil bluff on people, too. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Could you comment on the character of Lena and the types of complexities that you've developed for her? She's a difficult character to actually engage with.
She is. And, you know, honestly, people either love Lena or hate Lena. And that's how I wrote her, because I wanted you to know as a reader that it's okay not to like a character sometimes. I want you to always root for her. I want you, sometimes you may want to shake her and say, why are you doing these horrible, stupid things? But she's also a woman who was sexually assaulted, and I wanted to write realistically about the recovery of someone who was sexually assaulted. And I haven't ruined the plot for the first book because that's what happens to her. But a lot of people assumed she wouldn't be in another book after that. And to me, that's when her character got interesting. And she gets into a really bad relationship. She drinks too much. She does a lot of things that women who are sexually assaulted do. And again, it was a response to something I was reading in a lot of books where if a woman was sexually assaulted, you were either supposed to just think of her as someone who's pitiful, or you were supposed to wait for the strong hero to come in and make beautiful love to her and cure everything. And so Lena was a response to that. And I really worked hard to make her as complex as she is, because this is something that is defined her life for a long time, but I think in the latest book, she's learned to define it in other ways. Maybe not positive ways, but she's certainly taken more control of her life.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes?
Hi, thank you for your comments about libraries, first of all. And also, people who read a lot of series, sometimes they feel that there's maybe an agreement with the audience and the author. And in one of your books, I was completely shocked.
Please don't spoil it.
I'm not going to. But I wonder if you had any resistance when you were thinking about doing that.
Well, it's hard to talk about this without giving away a major plot point, but I did something that some people don't agree with. And I got a lot of nasty emails from people. And I wrote back to all of them, and the first thing they said was, "Oh wow, we didn't think you would write back," which I thought, haha, just goes to show you should be a little nicer when you write these emails. We read these books to be shocked and to be thrilled and to be surprised, and if you can say I didn't do any of those things, then I would probably think in my head that you were lying. I wouldn't say it to your face. But here's the thing. No one wants to read about happy people. You think you do, but you really don't. Even when you read Ann Tyler, you're not reading for the happy people. You're reading for, you know they're going to be happy somewhat in the end, but you want them not to be happy for a really long time. And if she was writing a series, they would never be happy ever. You know, that dog would be dead by now from Accidental Tourist. So that's a way of talking around it. But I did on my, if you're friended with me in Facebook, thank you very much. But I wrote a letter online explaining why I did some of the things I did in the books that you can find. And if you can't, just email me and I'll send you the link.
Hi, just for the record, that letter that you wrote online was what kept me reading your books.
Oh, it worked.
Yeah, I did. I was just, because I've been reading you for a long time and getting your newsletters, which are hysterical, and you, I mean, you're a goof. How do you, I don't know, it's just funny to find someone who writes things that are so dark and realistically horrible that it can be so nuts. I mean,
Well, thank you, I think.
I know. It didn't come out quite like I meant it, but
I hope. Well, you know, because I have this sense of laid-backedness, if I could make up a word, I'm able to write these things. Yeah. But, well, that was a nasty laugh. Where'd that come from? But all the crime writers I know are great, goofy people. I mean, Michael Connelly, Harlan Coben, I mean, they're just silly guys. Stephen King is just a big old goof. On the other hand, no offense to my colleagues here today, but romance writers can be some of the nastiest people you've ever met. And I think we won't even talk about those drunks in the children's booth. But I think it's cathartic. I think we get it all out on the page, and so it means that we can be nice to people and open the doors for old ladies and do all the things that you're supposed to do anyway. And for me, it is very cathartic, but I've always had this interest in dark things, and I don't think that's in direct opposition to my personality. I think believe it or not, I think there's a lot of humor in my books. I mean, people may not think that. And I wrote a book called Martin Misunderstood. And some of my Amazon reviews were Karin Slaughter, you're not funny. And, stick to writing what you know and all this stuff. So when I've tried to inject some of my humor into this particular book, it failed spectacularly. So perhaps I should just keep all my darkness in that one area and not cross over. Though it is being made into a movie, so suck it, monkeys. Yes.
Do you have a routine as a writer? You write in the morning or in the afternoon? Do you do your research first or as you go?
Well, I research all the sex myself. I wanted to see what the sign was for that. I wish I had a better routine than the one I have, because when I was writing before I was published, I had to do it whenever I had the opportunity. And I was very careful to structure time before work and after work, and because I had a real job and I had to do that job. So now I kind of work that same way. I have a cabin up in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I go up there and sequester myself, and I just work from 8 in the morning until 8 at night, or however long I can, and I do this a couple of weeks at a time, and then I'm so exhausted I never want to write again, and I have to go home and live a normal life, and then I'm back. And about 5 years ago, I heard myself complaining about this, and I thought, well, gosh, it seems to be working. Maybe I should just keep doing it. So I wouldn't recommend anyone write this way, but it works for me. Yes, ma'am.
So I was curious that the physician that you picked to be one of your main characters was a pediatrician. Could you talk about why you picked a doctor that deals with children?
Well, when I first made Sarah a doctor, I thought that it would be good for her to be a pediatrician. One, because, I mean, honestly, women tend to be pediatricians. And I wanted to use that construct because when I was growing up in Jonesboro, Georgia, which was a very small town, I was there, the only role models we had were school teachers or nurses. And I remember when my mother took me to the dentist once, and there was a new dentist, and it was a woman, and I laughed because I didn't think a woman could be a dentist. And so I wanted Sarah to be a pediatrician. I wanted her to deal with kids so she would know a lot of people in town. Pediatricians know stuff about you that you would not want them to know because your kids are loudmouths and they're indiscreet. And they'll say things like, Mommy was taking a shower with the postman this morning, or, so anything you think's a secret, your pediatrician or your school, your child's teacher knows it. Maybe a librarian, be careful. But I thought it would be good for her to have consciously chosen to leave Atlanta and be in Grant County to be a role model for children. And in one of the earlier books, she says that's one reason she doesn't like Lena Adams is because Lena's the only female detective on an all-male police force, and she thinks you're supposed to be a role model, and you're the worst role model for these little girls in town. And I wanted Sarah to have that pride in what she was doing and to have made a conscious choice to do what she was doing. Anyone else? Well, I'm going to get the little thing saying this is all the time you have pretty soon. So I'd just like to say thank you very much, even maybe if you're not happy with some of the choices I made. Oh, wait, we got another question.
Two.
Uh-oh.
I didn't get your signature today because I didn't want to be like cards flat.
Yeah.
The other.
Well, it was hot over there. I don't blame you.
And then my next question is, are you going to do a standalone book without Sarah or Will?
I may do a standalone book. I want to write about Amanda Wagner in Atlanta in the 1960s being a cop, because this was a time when the Klan still ran the police force.
Really?
And this was a time, well, not until 1962 could a black officer arrest a white person. And so, I mean, and this was shocking to me to realize. And I've been investigating the police force and doing a lot of research into that. And I want to write specifically about what it's like for women to be cops because it hasn't changed that much. Because the women who survived during that time were the women who sort of machoed it up and didn't show any of their femininity. Because, and a lot of women here probably know this in their own line of work, but it's okay for a man to throw up or be disgusted at a crime scene, but a woman will not do that. And I talked to this one police officer who just retired and was a cop in the 1960s, and she said, I never peed on the job because if I asked to go to the bathroom, they would say, typical woman. And I thought, well, one, your bladder must be bigger than your head. But I thought it would be really interesting to write about that because I grew up on Cagney and Lacey,
I have one more question. I have to wait you only write once a year?
One book a year, that's right. I'm sorry. You want them to be good, don't you?
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, let me finish it by saying I'm doing the job that I wanted to do since I was a kid, and I don't think a lot of people get to do that, but I had a signing a little while ago, and this woman came up to me and said, I went to kindergarten with you, and that's the worst thing you want to hear if you're an author, because you don't remember them because you were in kindergarten. And she said, I remember you because when the teacher went around and said, what do you want to be when you grow up? You said you wanted to be a writer, and you're a writer today. And I'm the only other person in class who answered that question that day and is doing exactly what I said I wanted to do. And, hats off to you for being a writer, and hats off to me for being divorced from a really wealthy man. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.